Welcome back now for the news in detail. Saudi Arabia says it will limit the number of domestic pilgrims attending Hajj this year to around 1,000. The country has already banned international visitors from making the Islamic pilgrimage in a bid to control the coronavirus. The decision marks the first time in Saudi Arabia's modern history that Muslims outside the kingdom have been barred from performing the Hajj. There were fears the Hajj might be cancelled altogether. But now the country has decided to hold the annual gathering with a limited number of people currently living in the kingdom. An estimated 2 million people would otherwise have visited Mecca and Medina in July for the annual gathering. The Indian government has decided to reduce the staff strength in Pakistan's High Commission in New Delhi by 50%. In a statement, India's Ministry of External Affairs said India would reciprocally reduce its own presence in Islamabad to the same proportion. Pakistan has already downgraded its diplomatic ties with India after it illegally annexed occupied Kashmir last year in August. Days later, India was asked to recall its High Commissioner Ajay Basaria. Now, the number of global COVID-19 cases has crossed 9 million as the death toll topped 471,000. In Brazil, 654 people have died overnight, with the tally exceeding 51,000. The death toll in the United States has crossed 120,000. More details in this report.
Despite no signs of the pandemic abating, people in Brazil have swarmed Rio de Janeiro beaches amid surging infections. Meanwhile, Canada's largest city, Toronto, will enter the second stage of the three-step reopening plan from tomorrow. An alarming surge in the COVID-19 cases in parts of the US following the ease in lockdowns is raising concerns. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says the rising rate of infections and hospitalizations was unacceptable, but he said he has no plans of shutting down the state again.
COVID-19 remains a very fast-spreading virus that will remain in Texas, the United States, and across the entire world until treatments are available to mitigate it. As a result, we must find ways to return to our daily routines while also learning ways to coexist with COVID-19.
In the UK, cinemas, museums and galleries will reopen from 4th of July as Prime Minister Boris Johnson further eases restrictions. Elsewhere, after months of closure, Tokyo's Disney Resort will open on July 1st. The World Health Organization says the lack of global leadership and unity to fight the coronavirus is a bigger threat than the outbreak itself.
The world is in desperate need of national unity and global solidarity. The politicization of the pandemic has exacerbated it. Ultimately, the pandemic has shown that we are humanity, one humanity, and none of us are safe until all of us are safe.
In Thailand, the Red Cross is working overtime, providing 800,000 masks to migrant workers and health volunteers.
Now in Pakistan, 105 more people have died from the coronavirus overnight, raising the death toll to 3,695. The Health Ministry says 3,946 new cases have been reported during the past 24 hours, taking the count to over 185,000. The ministry said nearly 73,500 patients have recovered so far, while over 3,200 are critical. The southern province of Sindh leads in the number of infections with more than 71,000 cases, while Punjab is second with over 68,000 cases. China says it has agreed with India to take measures to ease tensions along a disputed stretch of their border. At a media briefing, Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian rejected Indian media reports of 40 Chinese casualties in the conflict, calling it a fake news. This comes after 20 Indian soldiers died on June 15 in a clash at the disputed Galwan Valley along the line of actual control. The heightened tensions between the two countries have drawn international concerns, with the UN urging both sides to exercise maximum restraint. US President Donald Trump has extended a pause on some green cards and suspended visas for other foreign workers until the end of 2020. In a press briefing, the White House official said the move will create jobs for Americans hurting economically due to the pandemic. They said the freeze will impact about 525,000 people, including 170,000 people blocked by green cards ban. Officials said those who already have valid visas will not be affected, even if they are currently outside of the United States. The order is in line with Trump's hardline policy, as he has ramped up his anti-immigrant rhetoric ahead of November's presidential elections. In Yemen, clashes have erupted between government forces and southern separatists hours after Saudi Arabia says the two sides agreed to maintain ceasefire in Abyan province. A military official said government forces launched attacks on the Southern Transition Council sites east of Zinjibar. He said dozens of fighters were killed and wounded in the attacks. Violence has flared between the STC and government forces since the group declared self-rule over Aden, other southern provinces, in April. The conflict dated back to March 2015 when Houthi rebels seized the capital Sana'a and forced President Hadi to flee the country. Thousands of Palestinians in Jericho have staged a protest against Israel's unilateral plan to annex parts of West Bank and the Jordan Valley. Dozens of foreign diplomats, including UN Peace Envoy for the Middle East and EU's representatives, also attended the demonstrations.
British, Chinese, Russian, Japanese and Jordanian diplomats participated in the rally. UN envoy Nikolai Mladenov said US-backed annexation plan can kill peace and Palestinian statehood. He said annexation is against international law and Palestinians must oppose Israeli plan by peaceful means. Meanwhile, hundreds of Bedouins also demonstrated against Tel Aviv's plans to confiscate their land in Khirbat al-Watan village in Negev region of southern Israel. High Follow-up Committee for Arab Citizens of Israel held protests in the city of Be'er Sheva with Arab members of Israeli Knesset taking part. Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki announced UN Human Rights Council adopted 3 resolutions in favor of Palestine. The resolution endorsed Palestinians' right to self-determination and human rights in occupied territories.
Meanwhile, Sudan says it has repulsed Ethiopia's attack on Anfal military camp in the eastern Al-Qadarif state. In a statement, Sudan's army said it inflicted wide losses on Ethiopian forces. It says Sudan has the right to defend the territory from any attack. Earlier in May, 3 soldiers of Sudan were killed, but the two countries have agreed to work towards reducing tensions. Both countries have held multiple unfruitful talks over the issue. Sudan and Ethiopia dispute the demarcation of the border between them. Now, France says it will not tolerate Turkey's military intervention in Libya, accusing Ankara of playing a dangerous game. Speaking in Paris, President Emmanuel Macron said Ankara is violating all of its commitments made at the Berlin conference earlier this year. Macron said Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi had a right to intervene in Libya because of the shared border. He said Sisi has a reason to worry when he sees troops arriving at his border. Macron said Libya is a Mediterranean subject which affects France, as everyday scores of men and women are fleeing to Europe.
I have already had the opportunity to say very clearly to President Tayyip Erdogan, I consider that Turkey is playing a dangerous game in Libya today and going against all of its commitments made at the Berlin conference.
In a related development, the UN has established a fact-finding mission to Libya to probe war crimes. The measure was taken after the International Criminal Court said that mass graves discovered recently may constitute to war crimes. The fact-finding mission experts will document alleged violations and abuses of international human rights laws by all parties in Libya since 2016. The UN Human Rights Council adopted a resolution strongly condemning all acts of violence in the war-torn country. It expresses concern at reports of torture, sexual and gender-based violence, and harsh conditions in prisons and detention centers. The UN Security Council has adopted a resolution to renew the mandate of its assistance mission in Somalia until 31st of August. The resolution requested the Secretary General to continue keeping Security Council informed on its implementation. The Council will also be updated on the ground situation and progress towards achieving key political benchmarks. Earlier, the Security Council decided unanimously on March 30th to extend the mandate of the mission until June 30th. UNSOM was established in June 2013 after assessment of the UN in support of the establishment of the federal government of Somalia. Now in Tunisia, police have fired tear gas to disperse the anti-government protesters, hurling stones at them and blocking roads in the southern city of Tatouine. The clashes between the police and protesters demanding an end to unemployment continued for a second straight day. Demonstrators have been calling on the government to implement a 2017 deal to create jobs in oil companies and infrastructure projects. The unemployment rate in the region now is at 30%, one of Tunisia's highest. Tunisia was the birthplace of the 2011 Arab Spring uprisings that toppled those in power in countries across North Africa and the Middle East. Since then, its economy has been in crisis and no government has managed to resolve problems including high inflation and corruption. Now, a rocket has landed in the perimeter of Baghdad International Airport in close proximity of the US military headquarters. The Iraqi military says the Katyusha rocket was launched from a village west of Baghdad. It said there was no significant damage to life or property as a result of the attack. There was no immediate claim of responsibility. This is a second such attack hitting the Baghdad International Airport in the past 5 days. The US says it no longer wants to dethrone Syria's President Bashar al-Assad. The US Special Representative for Syrian Engagement, James Jeffrey, said Washington is instead asking for a radical shift in the regime's behavior. Jeffrey said Washington only wishes the country to enact major reforms akin to the Japanese overhaul following its defeat in World War II. His comments mark a paradigm shift in policy after demanding Assad's ouster since the start of Syrian civil war in 2011. Jeffrey said the latest US sanctions are not meant to torpedo the economy, but to stop Assad and his allies from profiting from the conflict. Earlier last week, Washington imposed new sanctions on the Syrian government, targeting 39 new entities. Prisoners as part of the Doha deal. Meanwhile, Russia's ambassador to the US, Anatoly Antonov, has met with Khalilzad to discuss coordination in Afghanistan. Moving on, Washington has praised the results of the first round of Russian-US talks on strategic stability in Vienna. Special Presidential Envoy for Arms Control Marshal Billingsley said the two sides discussed full range of nuclear topics. In a tweet, the US envoy said both sides have agreed in principle on the second round of consultations. The 10-hour Russian-US consultations on strategic stability were held behind closed doors. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov led the Russian delegation. Issues of the extension of the New START treaty were among the topics of the Russian-US strategic stability consultation. The city of Seattle says it will take back control of the so-called Capitol Hill organized protest area. In a news conference, Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin said the recent shooting incident prompted the decision as it affected businesses and local residents. Durkin said the administration will prefer a negotiated solution, contrary to the police chief seeking greater authority to use force if required. Earlier on Saturday, two shooting incidents left one dead and two others injured. Meanwhile, a New York City police officer has been suspended without pay after rendering a black man unconscious in a chokehold. New York mayor and its police department deemed the incident unacceptable, days after the city council outlawed chokeholds after George Floyd's death. Now, Beijing says it will respond if Washington continues to target Chinese media organizations operating in the U.S. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian made these remarks at a press briefing after the U.S. designated 4 more news organizations as propaganda outlets. The State Department listed China Central Television, China News Service, People's Daily, and Global Times as foreign missions. In a press conference, U.S. diplomat for East Asia alleged the outlets were mouthpieces for Beijing. The latest order follows a similar move against 5 other Chinese media outlets, including state news agency Xinhua, in February. US-based employees of all 9 outlets will be treated the same as staff at Beijing's diplomatic missions. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. President Donald Trump, while dismissing reports about termination of trade deals with China, has said the pact is fully intact. Trump said he hopes that Beijing lives up to the terms of the agreement. Earlier, White House trade advisor Peter Navarro said President Trump had decided to terminate the China trade deal. However, he said intelligence officials are nearly convinced that the coronavirus pandemic originated in a Wuhan lab. The US has accused India of engaging in unfair and discriminatory practices on charter air transportation services. The US Transportation Department has issued an order requiring Indian air carriers to apply for case-by-case authorization before charter flights. The department said it seeks to restore a level playing field for American airlines under the US-India Air Transport Agreement. The ruling said Delhi had banned all scheduled services and stopped approving US carriers for charter operations. It said Air India has been conducting to and from repatriation charter flights since May 7th. Washington first raised objections with Delhi through engagement by US Embassy, New Delhi, on May 28. The order will come into effect from July 22nd. European stock markets are trading higher following a turbulent session as President Donald Trump said the China trade deal is fully intact. Frankfurt's DAX is trading over 2% higher. CAC 40 in Paris has gained nearly 1.5% higher. London's FTSE 100 is trading nearly 1% higher. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index led the gains, closing over 1% higher. Nikkei 225 gained 0.5%, while Shanghai Nice time for the weather updates. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News. Take care.